want to see this. And I just put a link in there to, I don't know, is that open for everyone? I'm not sure with permissions, how that works.
I don't have it.
To the link, is that?
I mean, I really appreciate all that you've been saying, and I just have a few kind of practical things regarding session one, and I wondered if it's appropriate to discuss those now or leave it till next
Yeah,
week.
go for it. Yeah, this is kind of just
Well,
open. We're just kind of exploring random.
yeah. I mean, one of the things, and I know you're probably already wedded to it, but is this idea of having 2.5 hour sessions. For me, 2 hours would be long enough, and to have the empathy circles as 1 hour instead of an hour and a half. I just think there's a lot of research about attention spans, and I actually feel that 2 hours is online is more than enough, and a 2.5 hour session for a lot of people would just be too much. So that's one thing. Another thing is how to make it a bit more interactive. You know, your presentation, I'm a great believer, instead of giving the information, actually creating a situation where people want to know the information. Obviously, they wouldn't have signed up for the course if they, didn't want to discuss the definition of empathy. But for instance, when you introduce Rogers, instead of just explaining, it would be like, well, what do you already know about Rogers? Write in chat. It's this kind of trying to make it more ownership of the participants, so that they are involved by writing things in chat, and there wouldn't be time to break into discussion groups about it. But yeah, I don't know if you can. I'm realizing my internet is
We're hearing you. I'm hearing you. Well, everything.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing this, but anyway. So yeah, it's that idea of making it, using more modalities, just arrange. I love some of the things that you did, like Violetta said about the, what's the pictures with the various, what is this person feeling? That kind of interactivity, I think, is so important, and especially if it's 2.5 hours. So yeah.
Yeah, so you just want kind of more participation and so engagement of participants.
To my view, and whenever you give information, it's really great to preload that by, well, what do you already know about this?
Yeah.
Okay, so then they write in chat, whether you're talking about Rogers or who, yeah. What do you, yeah, just that idea of engagement.
Yeah, well, that was the session one was that it was to give this model. Kind of, this is the model we're going to be exploring in the 7 weeks, and then what is your definition of empathy? So it is 30 minutes of sort of an introduction, kind of preparing everyone. And then it's an hour and a half of an empathy circle to hear from everyone. I mean, the first session specifically for that. So
yeah, yes, I appreciate that, and I think that's great. And my suggestion is, during the presentation, you also make it interactive, like
Yeah, it could be that that the testing, using the empathy in the eyes test.
Yeah.
So that having a few little exercises like that during the presentation, like to give it the experience. So yeah. So if you have specifics, if you have specific exercise, I'm not a fan of the chat because it's just too much to read. But something that's sort of more engaging, like here's a picture, here's the empathy in the eyes test. Let's go through a short test. So and then you get everyone to maybe even do a poll. I think there's polls so for engagement. So yeah.
So how do you feel about having 2-hour sessions rather than 2.5 hours?
We did 2-hour sessions in the first facilitator training, and it just wasn't enough. It was just too time, and especially if we have eventually have larger cohorts when we we've gone up to about, over 30 people in a cohort, and we just needed the 2.5 hours. So I'm kind of a fan of 2.5 hours, just to have more space. And I haven't
Yeah, I
heard
mean,
about.
one of the things, the math on the empathy circles, if an hour-long empathy circle and you have 4 people in it, that means each person gets to speak about 15 minutes. They probably would get 4 turns if you're taking 5-minute turns. But then half of that time is they're being reflected. So, they're really only speaking for about 7 or 8 minutes. And so the reason to have a longer circle, like an hour and a half, is first off, if you have 5 people, that math works out better. And even with 4 people, the amount of speaking time you get is just a little bit more substantial. And my experience is that you don't really, unless you get to a third or fourth speaking turn, you don't. The empathy circle is a lot less satisfying in terms of participation. So that's and then so in a class, if there's an hour and a half empathy circle, there's some time before you go in and some time reflecting after you come out. And so that, I suppose in theory, that could be shorter in order to get it into a 2-hour time block. And maybe if you had the videos that people were watching as preparation to go into the class, the time before going into an empathy circle could be shorter. Maybe it could be 15 minutes or 20 minutes instead of a half an hour. But it's when you're trying to do a little bit of presentation and also include like feedback from the previous session, people that had questions, and you have a chance to take a few minutes to answer them. It's hard to get into the empathy circles before 30 minutes. That's been the challenge in the current course.
My experience was that the full group debrief, I did go to one session in this last cohort and just couldn't go back because it was 3.5 hours. And I didn't see a lot of point to that. I've shared that with Edwin. There were, I don't remember, 40 people and everybody shared just one sentence. But again, I am pretty happy with my focus, but by the 5th person, they were starting to blend together. I definitely did not want to hear 40 people how they're living the circle right now. Didn't make sense to me. It took a lot of time. And we definitely didn't fit into those 30 minutes because there were too many. So the full group debrief maybe could be shorter. Maybe it could be, Edwin and I were saying, you could play out the emotion, you could express it and do that quicker, more live, or maybe something along those lines. I don't know. But I definitely agree with Wendy. 2.5 hours is a bit pushing it.
Yes, I guess that question of the debrief. Some people have mentioned that, at the debrief, you hear a lot of people. We only do the participants. We have 25 minutes for the debrief. So there is something about hearing. I mean, I always enjoy hearing kind of what people's feedback is, and it does create a group feel, it seems like to me. But other people have said that too, about it's just too repetitive. So
I agree that the group debrief is the area where I think the most tweaking could happen, that is potentially the least productive in the courses I've been in. And another way to do what I do think is valuable is I think it is valuable to reflect on your experience in the empathy circle. So that could be done in people could be sent into breakouts of 3, and each person could have 2 minutes to talk about what their experience was. So in 6 minutes, you've got it done, and you go into that with people that you were not in the empathy circle with. So different people than you were in the empathy circle with. Now, logistically, that's not easy to do, to reconfigure the rooms and like figure out who was not with who. not easy to do, but that would be a way to shorten the amount of time and still have some reflection. Another way to do it that I've seen happen in big groups is you just say, we'd like to hear from half a dozen people what their experience was like. So you're hearing from some people, but not from everybody, you know. And then if you're really wanting everyone's feedback, there's also the feedback form. So that in terms of the getting feedback for the class, the management of the class, you can get that from the feedback form, not from hearing each person say something.
Yeah,
So
Mindy,
another,
let's see. Mhm.
sorry, another practical question I have. Will it be the case that people will be asked to do the empathy circle training first and then this module 2?
It would be ideal. I had thought of opening it up because some people, some people do like the experiential, but other people are sort of more the cognitive. And so to give them the choice that they have a minimum of 2 empathy circles. But I think this is module 2. So ideally, I see Violetta shaking her head. You think it should be required, the facilitator training first, or?
No, I'm just noting again the difference you see between experiential and cognitive. It's deep within you, and as continentalist, I would say there's no difference. We're putting meaning into our experiences, and then cognitive doesn't happen separately. But I think it will be easier to open it to everybody who's experienced the circle at least 2 times, and hopefully encourage them to become facilitators afterwards.
Yeah, that was my inclination too. Just take module 1 or module 2. It's up to you. Yeah.
Because I felt there was some overlap, of the initial, obviously there's the whole overlap of the explanation of how an empathy circle it functions, but then also overlap in the initial slides, some are part of the training, and then now some are part of module 2. So in terms of the initial suggestions from Lou, Violetta, that think that it could be made a bit shorter, I'm just wondering if there could be less kind of overlap with the initial training.
Yeah, so the explanation of how the empathy circle works, you mean?
Well, that, yes, and then the detail on that, but then also, some of the definition, some of the quotations, yeah.
So it's really about making it shorter. You're like, sounds like the. Well, this is a prototype, so it's good to hear how to kind of refine it, and it is always in terms of the length, for example. Well, one thing about the length, Violetta, you said 3.5 hours. It's because you were doing the facilitator training, and there's half an hour before and a half hour later, so that was why that was so long. I don't know, some people like it shorter, some people like it long. So there's always, it's not like one thing or the other. But I guess it is to make it more sort of efficient. In terms of, I just had another thought about the debrief at the end. One thing I've done in other circles is that someone expresses how they feel about it in a physical motion, and then the whole group mirrors that motion. And then so everybody's kind of getting their energy kind of going, because it's very physical. So that might be a way to make it kind of more entertaining. Plus there's a mirroring that happens that sort of mirrors what, empathy has that sort of a mirroring quality. So but then some people are like, oh, they feel too self-conscious about doing that. So you can give them a choice about it. So I don't know if are you familiar with what I mean, Lou? Just
yeah.
Okay. And the other point is, I see, yeah, on that's just that link I put in there, just so you know about it. That's sort of the table in Mural of the model. So a model where you can kind of compare other people's models, and you can see there's actually there's, it is, after looking at all these different, different models that people are using, it's limited in terms of what people are saying, right? It's like, and you don't want to delete the whole thing, whatever. Yeah.
I tried to go in and it requires a login.
Oh,
The link that you put in the
and
chat.
whoever just moved everything, if you can back up, I think Wendy, if you hit the back button, there's a button at the top. It says, let me just, because you just kind of move the whole, let me just, up here at the corner, it says undo. If you're in that window, if you could just hit the undo. Are you seeing that?
You're muted, Wendy.
Sorry, yeah, I was trying to get it sent so I could read it. So I don't
Oh.
know what I've done. Sorry.
Yeah, are you seeing, do you see that it says up here, there's a little button here, it says just hit undo and it'll move it all back.
At the moment, it's all gone off.
Okay, it won't.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I can do it. No. Oh. Yeah, I'm gonna probably make this so that people can't, that's it. I got it. Okay, anyway, so that I just threw that in there. It's nothing you have to do anything with. It's just kind of a systematically reviewing how people are using the term. And you'll just see that the reason there's so much confusion is there's people aren't consistently describing it, the empathy, and again, it's like you were saying, Lou, it's like, this is kind of what we mean, but then there's even the question is it what we all mean? Because even Violetta and I had some differences, and we did, like I said, we found that common starting point, and I think a lot of what we're understanding is similar, Violetta. So, but
I would say so.
yeah. So those are just some of my thoughts. I guess there's a question of what to do next. I think the next step would be to separate the videos, to make 2 separate videos. And then next week, hopefully the others will be here, and then do an empathy circle. The idea is that the first session is sort of an overview of the model. And then I'm hearing, Lou, you're saying like, I thought it was just like a simple, quick intro to the model. And then, in each session, we would go into a bit more depth. So I guess that was a question I had is, do you have the model beforehand, or you just sort of slowly, reveal the model with each session? So it does seem to me that having the framework and the model to begin with, now let's go into depth.
So I think it makes sense to, as an introduction, to present all 7 elements of the model, at least name them, and give a sentence or 2 about them, just so that you have an idea that these are the components, but then not go into much more detail until you get into the session for that component. Because really only because there's 7 elements, and if you go into all 7 of them in any kind of depth, that's really overwhelming. It's a lot to take in. It's enough to understand though they're there, and a little bit about what each one means. That's enough to take in initially about it, I think.
Yeah, Violetta, you're shaking your head.
I agree. I agree
Okay.
very much. Yeah.
I've only been looking at this 14 years.
That's the something of expertise, the dilemma of expertise, or I've been told by psychologists that's the problem with experienced people who teach something, is they don't understand how much they understand, and when they start to unpack it for people, it's completely overwhelming. That's happened to me when I've tried to teach video production to people, and I think, oh yeah, this is so simple. You just set up the camera, and then as I'm getting into it, I'm realizing there's like 50 things I'm doing when I'm setting up the camera. I'm looking at the light, I'm looking at the background, I'm looking at the height, I'm looking at the, and like all of that is just something I know and I do intuitively, so.
To reinforce what Lou was saying about maybe all that's needed is the 7 week, the naming of it and one sentence. That I think is on your slide that you call the 7 week arch. And
right.
maybe it's an Americanism, but I've not in Europe, well, certainly in UK, never heard that use of the term arch. We would just say, you know, the 7 week program, 7 week arch. What's that? You know, my immediate question, what does arch, sorry, oh, arc or arch? Or what?
The arc.
Oh, the arc. Okay, sorry. Yeah, but it's not a term that I've heard used in academia or in education generally. But yeah,
Okay, so something more like just overview or something like
yeah.
that. It would be-
Overview of the 7 week program or overview of the 7 weeks. The fewer words, the better, in my view, especially on a written slide and verbally. Yeah.
Okay, well, this is great having, you know, all these different points of views. I think that's going to help kind of refine it. So I'm hearing simplify, keep it simpler. Yeah. Introduce the pieces separately, a little bit in depth, keep it just a sentence or so. Yeah.
Is there going to be homework between sessions?
Yeah, there was homework. There was it in the outline. We had the closing. Let me just show that. So that was the 5-minute closing, kind of using the same process, the same outline that we have for trying to keep the style similar to the facilitator training. So we have the last 5 minutes. We hear any final trainer comments. We review what we did in the session. You know, it's just a quick outline. We review what we're going to do next week. We mentioned that we're going to have assignments, and we do our final jazz hands. And then the assignments, which are emailed out, is fill out the session feedback form. We ask for that feedback. We hold empathy buddy calls. So we wanted to do empathy buddy calls again. And then it was to read 2 articles by Carl Rogers, The Empathic and Unappreciated Way of Being, and he has another one on active listening. So I was thinking that would be the assignment too. But there could also be like a little video that we create for the session. Yeah.
I suggest that you put a time on those things, like if it's a video, it's 5 minutes, or the read, it's a 5-minute read or a 10-minute read, so that people have some idea of how much time it's going to take to do that. They'll be much more encouraged to do it. Like if it says, read this article, and it says 5 minutes, oh, okay, I'll do that. If it's an hour long, it's going to take me an hour to read the article. I know I need to set time aside for it, or, so I think that's a good idea to put a time thing next to assignments.
Okay, so something like this, fill out session feedbacks, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Hold your buddy call, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I have to see how long that takes.
Will all the assignments be reading, or will there be some sort of will it tie in with the type of empathy? So if it's imaginative empathy, will it be a more kind of creative? Will they be asked to, like you use that beautiful picture of the woman and daughter, take a picture of something that reflects empathy to you, or find an piece of artwork, or make a piece, to actually help people be looking into their creativity, actually to do some artwork, if they're so inclined.
I love that.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Those 2 articles. So the session 1 was the idea was the overview, and then to hear from everyone what for them what empathy meant and how it relates to the empathy circle. So it's kind of sort of a place for everyone to bring, where they are. And then the second one was session 2 was basically Roger's explanation of empathy. So we're kind of going into that. And his empathy is, as the listener, you're listening to the speaker, and that sensing into this to the speaker is kind of what he's calling empathy. It's direct. It's, you know, listening for sort of an accuracy to hear the person, be aware, you know, sensing into, feeling into their inner world. And so that's the session 2 aspect of empathy. So yeah, anything that kind of helps, any kind of activities that kind of, so any readings, any videos, that one paper, Empathic and Appreciated Way of Being, Rogers actually made a video of it, so you can actually just watch the video. You don't have to read the paper, and so he narrated it. So that was one of the exercises. Yeah, so if you have more, you can just suggest them or write them up. Anything else? Violetta, thoughts? See you smiling.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide what else do we need to do today. What are I don't have any more thoughts about the exercises at this point, but I usually get my inspiration when I dive deep into whatever I'm doing. But I loved Wendy's idea about imaginative empathy, since this is my task. But obviously I could help with Edwin on all the things that you're on your own. I could help however.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe I wanted to talk to you about
Sure.
the framework.
Yeah.
You're a good person
Okay.
because you have that academic, the background of
Okay.
all those different concepts. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's I guess pretty much it, unless there's anything else. So hopefully next week we'll have others. We'll actually do
Yes.
an empathy circle. Yeah.
One main comment, Edwin, is thank you so very, very much. I think what, you know, you've done, what you've produced, I mean, it's sounding like we're, you know, picking little holes here and there. I really want you to know how grateful I am for what you're giving to the world. It's tremendous.
And thanks
Yeah.
for being here too, because I think it's all these contributions are gonna, I'm seeing, you know, we're gonna simplify it, kind of make it more accessible. So you bring that viewpoint. So I think it's gonna really strengthen the whole course. I think this is gonna be a really important course because it really lays out a view of empathy that's not well articulated, and making it simple and accessible for everyone to take part in, I think is going to be really helpful. It's going to be a real contribution.
It's really interesting when if you just Google, you know, empathy training, and the kind of, you know, strange things that come up, a lot of it just so unrefined in comparison to what you're offering, you know, just, yeah. A lot of rubbish out there, with all due respect.
Yeah. Well, okay, well, let's all go. I think Violetta, if you're going to stay back for a few minutes, then we'll see you next week, and you know, send any comments, any feedback by email. And
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Nice meeting you, Wendy.
Yeah, nice meeting you both. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Violetta.
Bye, Wendy. Bye, Lou.